Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session on the impact of AI regulation. We actually are perfectly positioned to have this discussion right after that phenomenal panel from Stuart with X and Vaughn and Michael. And X made a number of everyone made a number of valuable points, but X was obviously talking about responsible AI. And so this is a perfect opportunity to bring Laura Chadwick into the conversation. Laura is the president and CEO based in Washington of the Travel Technology Association. Welcome, Laura. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Dan. Great to be here.
I'm going to tell everyone briefly from my perspective what Travel Technology Association is. And then I know you've got a presentation that's going to be valuable for everyone to understand. And we've got a lot of questions to cover because even major VC funds in the last few months have really shifted their focus from just being investing in AI to ethical or responsible AI. And you have been at the heart of the action because you're in Washington, and we've seen Sam Altman and a number of tech pioneers being brought to discuss responsible AI. And so regulation is an important part and a consideration, but at the same time, we don't want to stifle innovation. And so you have a very interesting position, but the Travel Technology Association has been around for 25 years. You're celebrating your 25th anniversary. So you guys predated generative AI, but essentially, as I understand it, you empower traveler choice by advocating for public policy that promotes marketplace transparency and competition, and that you represent a lot of innovators in travel technology. So some of the big OTAs and global distribution companies, as well as MetaSearch and various travel management companies. So you've got an important role to play. And I think that's why we have to have this discussion today, part of the leadership track. So love to hear more from you and to walk us through what you're doing at Travel Tech Association.
Great. Well, thanks, Dan. And again, hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you. We're definitely going to get into what's going on in Washington, D.C. with policymakers about AI. We'll certainly talk about this activity and how it could impact the travel tech sector and your clients as well. And then I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing on AI here at Travel Tech. But first, I wanted to take a moment to introduce you to Travel Tech. So start with my slides. Here we go. And away we go. So yes, Dan, as you mentioned, our mission is to empower traveler choice. We are the Travel Technology Industries Trade Association. Policymakers are debating policies that impact your travel technology business. We here at the Travel Tech Association, we represent the industry in front of policymakers. And we do it not only here on the federal level, but we also do it with state policymakers. And at times we're up in Canada or down in Mexico. So we work on a variety of different policy issues like price transparency or junk fees, which is honestly still a very hot topic here in Washington, D.C., airline issues about refunds and website design mandates. We also work on topics related to the dominance of large tech companies. You bring up X, they may be one of them. And the dominance of these large tech companies and their ability to wipe out competition is an area of work for us. And that this is certainly true in artificial intelligence, which we'll get into momentarily. As Dan said, we represent the largest innovators in the travel technology industry. And you're right, we turned 25 this year, and I'll get into that in a moment. And so we offer our membership a wide variety of benefits, network, build relationships with other companies, gain specific travel tech insights about the impact of federal, state, and local legislation, ability to highlight your brands, contribute to the development of our public policy priorities. And then I marked here coming soon, an opportunity to work side by side with our industry members on committees and working groups. So we have various levels of membership ranging from the board of directors and down to a federal policy membership, state policy membership. And then I'm really excited to tell you about our advocate membership. We introduced this past October, and it was in recognition of our 25th year. And this advocate level membership is open to any company of any size in the travel tech sector, but it's really geared towards tech startups and small and medium-sized businesses. We know that nearly, over 25 years ago, the beginnings of Booking and Expedia and other players were just beginning. And at that time, where they were just the startup and nobody knew if they were going to, make it or not, they turned to advocacy. They knew that they needed to be represented in Washington, D.C. So our new advocate membership is that opportunity to, as a small and medium-sized business, a startup, to get involved with our advocacy. It's a really nice on-ramp. It's not too many responsibilities, but really some great opportunities to learn, share, promote your company, and connect with other travel tech member companies. Speaking of our 25th anniversary, we are holding an event on Capitol Hill, our Policy and Innovation Showcase, our first time ever. This is an opportunity for all of our members, including our advocate members, to take part. It's a great opportunity to introduce yourself and your company, your innovations to policymakers in media, and show how our industry is developing new technology to improve travel. So just a quick shot. We have a beautiful room overlooking the Capitol. It's going to be a really great event, and we're holding it, as I mentioned, on May 22nd. It's during National Travel and Tourism Week, so just tons of attention on the larger travel sector. It's a great time for us to be out there promoting our industry and our industry members and our trade association members. So what's a great way to stay up to date with what we do here at Travel Tech? I want to tell you about our Passport newsletter. We publish this every week. It's free. You get a nice update on what we here at Travel Tech are doing to support the industry. And then you get a curated news digest of the top stories at the intersection of travel, technology, and public policy. So these are issues that are perhaps not ripe yet, but are things that are, out there that our industry should be aware of. I've heard lots of compliments about this newsletter. It's, as I said, it publishes once a week on Wednesdays. Definitely something to check out. You can go to traveltech.org/subscribe or use this QR code to get in as well. So with that, Dan, let's get into it. I guess before we get started, though, with your questions, I did want to give just a brief overview, like a status check on where we are on AI policy developments here in Washington, D.C. So we'll start first. So, I mean, all of you are consumers of news. You're in the technology space. You're obviously working on great or interested in AI products. So you've got to know that AI has been a big topic of discussion here ever since ChatGPT came out in November 2022. And we have seen over the last, I would say, like April of last year really is where it began. And then this past October, President Biden issued his executive order, the safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of artificial intelligence. We're seeing activity at the Federal Trade Commission. This is about large tech platforms and their how they might use AI to, again, as I mentioned earlier, wipe out competition. There are activities at the U.S. Department of Transportation, and then also at the U.S. Department of Commerce, particularly the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And then over on the other side of Pennsylvania Avenue, where the U.S. Congress is in the Capitol building, there's been a lot of, dare I say, sound and fury about AI. And I know Dan and I will get into this during our Q&A and fireside chat. But what we've seen over there, we've had the bipartisan Senate Forum on Artificial Intelligence that was convened by Majority Leader Schumer and has brought folks like Google and X and certainly ChatGPT, as you mentioned, Dan, to the Capitol to testify and share their knowledge about AI. As I mentioned, a lot of sound and fury coming, and that comes in the form of various pieces of legislation. There are congressional hearings. There are a lot of press releases. And then just the other day, new this week, House leaders announced a bipartisan task force on artificial intelligence. So there's certainly a lot of activity in this space. So Dan, I don't know, you wanna dive right in or?
Sure, yeah, I've got a question I'm really keen to ask you. So you have an incredibly impressive background, both academically and clearly you have a massive influence and network. You've spent your career in the political arena, and in the last year and a half, you've moved into travel. So you're our advocate on the Hill for all things travel technology. And I think it's important. That's one of the primary reasons you're here. And I think one of the reasons I want everyone to really engage in this session. I think I've already seen Juan and some other people say I've signed up, because we met a few months ago and I saw you give a presentation. I was completely intrigued. I signed up and I've since been following, and I definitely encourage everyone else to. My one question that I really wanted to ask you to start off is that when I think about technology in Congress, I always come back to a quote that Jon Stewart, when he first hosted the Daily Show, and I was an avid watcher, and I'm so thrilled that he's back, especially for this year in the election cycle. But there was that great clip, I guess it was the Senator Ted Stevens, I guess he was a Republican from Alaska, and he had that series of tubes, that he described the internet, that it's just a series of tubes. Yeah. So I guess my first question to you is, what is it like working with Congress and state legislatures when it comes to technology?
Yeah, no, excellent question. So I worked on Capitol Hill for nearly 7 years. And I have, as you mentioned, I've been working in the policy space on technology issues ever since. And, I guess the easiest way to describe it is trying to convince or engage with your perhaps boomer parents. No offense, I have boomer parents, or, greatest generation grandparents, trying to help them navigate their DVR. They know the technology's there. They like to use it. They just don't know how it all works. And each of them bring their own particular point of view about technology, and then layer over what sort of their political bent is when it comes to regulation, the role of government, and then layer over that, a partisan, which often relates with their view of government. And, the fact that many members of Congress, especially on the U.S. House of Representatives, they often say they are a inch deep on policy topics, but a mile wide. At any given moment, they could be pulled into agriculture policy or talk about, certainly on top of everybody's mind, foreign policy. But technology, and especially AI, has really garnered a lot of attention in a way that a technology policy topic hasn't ever emerged. And I think that's really interesting. And it's really important for us, for travel tech, as we support the industry, for the folks on this session at your conference to really think about, right? You're spending lots of time developing your products, pitching your products, selling your products, your services, your innovations. And what happens if someone comes in and has got, some misguided bill comes in and takes that all away? That's what we do here at Travel Tech. We keep on top of topics like this for the benefit of the industry. But I'm sorry, I get really excited about these topics.
Well, given the time. No, clearly that's definitely, that was a sense when we got a chance to meet in person, and then we had a call afterwards. And that's why, I was saying I was really keen for you to be here, because you've also been in the role right about the time of this new epoch of this like last 14 months of since ChatGPT. And it's interesting, one of the questions that Alex Bainbridge, which he's presented, he's a AI expert in his own right, and he's been thoroughly engaged throughout this conference. And he had highlighted, why wasn't it a discussion before ChatGPT? And I guess the question I wanted to ask you that relates to that is that why policymakers are suddenly so interested in AI. I also wanted to frame that by asking the question that, you're there in the US, I'm based here in Canada, of course, but really there's two major markets for regulation. There's Europe and there's the US. And there's always the concern that if there's not regulation in China or Russia or other areas, that it'll hold some of those companies back. But so this is a very complex conversation, and there's so many different aspects to it. And that's why I guess the question I just directly wanted to ask you is like, what has all of a sudden I'm going to ask you a two-part question and give you the floor, which is, why all of a sudden have policymakers become so interested? Part of that can be part of that's obvious, I realize, but I'd love to hear your take on it, because there's a lot of new activity. But then what's actually getting done? Because I think that's part that we're seeing these hearings, but what's actually happening?
Yeah. So great topic, or great question. So, as I mentioned, there's a lot of sound and fury. There's just a lot of churning, a lot of statements. And I've put up a slide here that talks about like what our industry should be concerned about that. I'll say the short answer right now, that there's no current concerted effort in Congress that will envelop or touch the commercial use of AI, whether you're using it on the back end or you're using it in a generative AI. What people are really focused about right now are election interference. It is a big presidential election year. I think there's a lot of concern from that, but I think that's where it is. People are still, Congress is still intaking information. I think they see this as an opportunity to get things right. They might have mishandled, policy, data security, privacy. After 15 years, we still don't have a national privacy law. I think that they're thinking like, no, we're going to get out in front of this. So as far as concerns for our industry, I think it comes down to this. There's a lack of trust among consumers. There was some research done last year that said that it had actually ticked up since the introduction of ChatGPT. 85% of consumers believe that AI should be regulated. I couldn't tell you how, but they think it should. And so this lack of trust among consumers equals a lack of trust among policymakers. Consumers double as constituents. And so it's sort of this, dare I say, virtuous loop or unvirtuous loop that goes around. And contributing to that are media stories about the dangers of AI. And that just breeds this sort of like, we've got to do something, like, let's do something. But we don't want them to do just anything. We want them to adopt, policies that allow our industry, the travel industry, who you can see the use case. You guys have been talking about it for these 2 days of these tools in our sector. But we don't want to, be thrown out with the baby in the bathwater, right? We want to position ourselves. We want to be part of these conversations. And so we here at Travel Tech are now, this is a major area of focus for us. And I just want to talk briefly about what we're doing to help meet this lack of trust, this sort of urge to do something, but they don't know what. So let us help you, policymakers. Let the travel tech industry help you understand the value, the benefits, upsides of using this technology in the travel sector. So we have 3 major initiatives right now. Number 1, as I mentioned, it's still stalled 15 years later, a national data privacy law. There are 40 plus different state laws. We can't talk about protecting information in AI if we don't have one single set of rules about how we protect data. That is like the first step. we here at Travel Tech internally, our board members are coming together to develop the responsible use of AI in travel principles, and we look forward to sharing that with the industry. And then, as I mentioned about our upcoming event up on Capitol Hill, we are out there representing the industry. We are promoting the travel tech industry, we're promoting its members, and we are also talking about the positive use cases of AI in travel on Capitol Hill. And that these things taken together are a good place for us to be. But these are not only good for us to be out on Capitol Hill, it's a good place for our industry to be, and a good place for people to get plugged into what we do here at Travel Tech. I see that our session is over.
No, we can get still. We have a few more minutes because the next session. So there's two things I want to ask you. One,
sure.
I actually want to relay one of the questions that came in from Juan, which is also endorsed by Gisela, that Juan's been super active. Thank you, Juan, throughout the conference, and a lot of great questions. But one of the ones I'm looking at our list, and I'm looking at his, I'm like, this is actually, I have to ask you this question. And his question is, do policymakers have tech or AI experts in their staff that are educating them and keeping them up to date with tech innovations? So how does that work?
That's where the trade associations come in. They do have congressional staff. I myself handle technology policy, but I also handle Native Americans and veterans and foreign relations and transportation. There's not a real depth of tech knowledge on that. And so that's where trade associations come in to bring in, the innovators from their district, innovators who are supporting their constituents, to explain what the positive use cases are. And so that's so important. There is an axiom that everyone talks about here in Washington, D.C. It's if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So I think that means that if you are not, sharing your thoughts, making sure you have a place at the table, then inevitably someone's going to eat you, right? Someone's going to overlook you. And so that is the value of advocacy. And this is sort of a perfect storm between this policy issue and the desire to do something, and our new membership structure and us turning 25 and our renewed efforts to promote our industry up on Capitol Hill and advocate for good public policy that supports the technology, but as you said, supports it in a responsible way.
Yeah, that was the first time I heard that when you shared that line with me. And when I think about that, it's the when you join something for free, you're the product, and that's part of the reason we actually had charged a nominal amount for this conference. Is we wanted to make sure there's not an infomercial. All of this was curated content, editorial content that was designed for the audience's benefit. So, but I'm definitely going to take that line away. But one other thing I'd just love to have you finish off on, because our time has gone incredibly quickly, but I just want to make sure people know how to follow up with Travel Tech. So how do they stay up to date on what you're doing in this space?
Yeah. Again, Passport is a great way to, on a weekly basis, hear about what we're doing. And so I've thrown up our, traveltech.org subscribe QR code. And then I'd love to hear from you as well. But I have my email address. Please do reach out. We'd love to hear about your company, your innovations, and how you can get involved with our advocacy for the industry and on this, this new technology that, holds the promise to transform our industry.
That's great. No, thanks for leading the charge with this, joining this session, and we'll definitely keep in touch and hopefully have you on season 4 of our podcast to be able to talk about this in more detail, because I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions and hopefully lots of developments in this space. So thank you so much, Laura, for joining us, and we'll keep in touch.
Thanks, Dan. It's great to chat. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
See you again. Bye-bye.